is the student's belief in their ability to accomplish a task. There are four areas we have to pay attention to. We'll talk a little bit about those, but there are four areas. There are areas within self-efficacy that we really have to understand. The first thing is just to understand where we first kind of see the concept and the content of self-efficacy. Albert Bandura, you may have studied him when you were going through school, social learning theorist. Later was actually recognized as a Presidential Medal of Honor winner in education just recently. So Bandura described, this is who it looks like, this is Bandura. He did this regression analysis of things that work, that fall, and the regression analysis says, well, these things work, these things don't work. And above the line was always, and really highly above the line, was self-efficacy. So self-efficacy is something we can actually measure. We can see where kids see themselves in their ability to do a task, but it's Bandura who actually described it this way. So it's not just how do you feel about can I accomplish a task, it's do you think you are capable of, right, organizing and executing the courses of action required to manage prospective situations. We talked about it from the adult level, right, earlier in this, but now from the kid level, if you just take those words and think about what do I have to do as an educator in the classroom to help choreograph that? Because it doesn't just happen automatically. And it can't just be by us telling kids to do something, right? It's how do you help kids develop their belief that they can actually organize and execute the plans or courses of action that are required to manage prospective situations, say lifelong learning, or right, that you're putting your mission statement. So the question that you have to ask yourself is, what teaching practices would we use? How do we engage students in a process that actually helps them see what learning's all about, to help them see that they can execute those plans of action? And the question is, does the culture of your classroom actually promote a healthy, high self-efficacy among students? So if it can be measured, and we know these are the performance outcomes, these are the keys to it right here. The keys for enhancing, and in the classroom, the things that we have to be paying attention to are these. Performance outcomes, positive and negative, have an effect on a student's outcome. We've already talked about that. I talked about those fourth grade kids. They don't believe they have the capability of organizing. They shut down learning really fast because they don't believe that they can do it. So their performance outcome was a negative, and therefore they don't think they can accomplish it. We have kids who have negative experiences on an assessment, but because of the way the teachers organize for it, they see that there is a pathway to success. The number one thing that kids say keeps them motivated towards a pathway of success, even when they struggle, is if the teacher has created a pathway to success. Help them identify their strengths, help them understand what they need to work on, and help them in that learning, that relearning that has to occur. You have seen it, I've seen it, where kids go, yeah, I can still do this, but you had to create the opportunity for it. Vicarious experiences, that's how students see themselves, right? As they compare themselves, it's automatically, it happens. I know we don't mean it to happen, but trust me, automatically kids are comparing themselves to other kids. What you have to work at is getting them to compare themselves to the learning target and where they are in relationship to hitting the learning target, the exemplars, the standards, the clear targets, the success criterion that you said they had to demonstrate to master the concept. Physiological feedback, that's just the feeling we get. And then again, this whole thing about verbal persuasion. Verbal persuasion is your answer, not written persuasion, right? So feedback in the form of verbal feedback. Helping them see and believe in themselves, verbal feedback is a critical component. It's so much more powerful than written feedback, by the way. I mean, you probably already discovered that in your journey, that your verbal feedback is much more powerful than any written feedback you're ever going to give kids because of how interactive it is. So if you think about the classroom you're trying to create a classroom where even a negative experience can be viewed into a positive experience, like the teacher did in the video. Or where a positive experience that a student has is recognized appropriately, right? Where they are comparing that positive experience to the standard, to the learning outcomes, therefore vicarious experience in that process. So let me kind of give you an example. I know my granddaughter is eventually going to, one day, poor Charlie, who's named after me, she's going to be in some session and say, yeah, your dad used to talk about you, right? Or your papa used to talk about you, right? So this is Charlie's first experience in kindergarten with a test. Came in October. Now, I got this page because I was worried. I came home from a work day. It was October. I stopped by her house. She lives like 5 blocks from me. I said, Charlie, how was school today? And she goes, it was hard. I said, oh, great. So you're right. This is October. This is kindergarten. And we're already going, school's hard. I said, why? She said, we had a spelling test today. She said, I think I got them all right. So I had to know. I had to know, what does this teacher do? Because this could crush her, right? The feedback that she was going to receive could crush her. So this is the feedback she received. What do you think about that feedback? Initial reactions to the feedback? Can I give you some more? Okay. So not only did she get a 100% and the angel face, I think that's a halo. I don't think it's a hairline on the face. You think it's a halo? Yeah. A receding hairline on the angel on the face, right? She also got a certificate of achievement, and she got a free meal to Schlotsky's. How about that? Now, if you think about those keys, she's getting a lot of positives. I feel sorry for the teachers who are going to keep this up, but she's getting a lot of positives. Seriously, you have time to do all this? And do you need to do all that? Is one of the questions, because she's trying to create a positive feeling here, while at the same time knowing that, where are the kindergarten teachers here? How do you have your kids sitting? And do you have them sitting in groups?
Yes.
Like usually a table of 3 or 4 kids? Yeah. That's how they do it in her classroom too. Okay, real quick. What are you thinking? Maybe you're not thinking the same thing I'm thinking. What's happening in that classroom as she passes these papers and these certificates and everything else out? What's your thought? Real quick, talk to your neighbor. You have a concern here at all? What could be going on? I mean, this is great for Charlie, right? But maybe great for Charlie.
Like celebrate
Thoughts? Anybody want to share out loud what we were all thinking? Probably. Share it out loud. We're probably all having the same thoughts.
Kids that didn't get one are just so bad.
What?
Kids that didn't get one are just.
What happened to the kid who got a 50%? Do they actually? I mean, first of all, kindergarten kids, do they know what 100% is? No, seriously. But we know it gets an angel face, so it must be a good thing. Then I wonder, what is it? Do we write 50% on a kid's paper who might have stumbled or struggled? They may have studied she studied hard for this test. Her mom went over this test with her. She studied really hard. She's well represented. Like a lot of your kids, well represented, right? But it's possible to study for a test and not do well because you get confused, right? Or mixed up on something that you thought you had the night before. Anybody ever had that experience in your personal life? You thought you had it the night before, and then you took the test, and it's like, oh my gosh, I've forgotten what it was, or I mixed it up. Yeah, it happens all the time. So sometimes it's not that you didn't study hard enough, right? It's just you got mixed up. Okay? So what goes, you're thinking the same, what's happening to the kid? What does their paper have on it? What does their paper have on it? And then how does that affect to performance outcomes, both positive and negative? How does that affect vicarious experiences? How does that affect the feeling they get? And how does that, where's the verbal persuasion now after you just showed how we did in comparison to other kids in the sitting around group of 3 or 4? Self-efficacy is influenced every single day in almost every single action you have with a kid. But when it comes to assessment, it's big time stuff, right? Because take a look at this. This is a first grade spelling test. This first grade spelling test, we missed 5. Now, there's no angel face. I'm glad there's not a face with a frowny face. Have you seen those? The teacher put a face on there, but it's a frown, right? There's no angel face, there's no smiley face, there's no percent, it's just -5 in big red letters on the student's paper. Now, my question to you, if you have a classroom that supports high self-efficacy, you're doing something with this, it might be a little different than what the teacher does. Quickly respond to this thought. How should our teachers in our classrooms, how would you expect your colleagues with your own child or my grandchild, how would you expect them to respond when Charlie, who studied for this test also, and knew these words going in, she had aced it at home, but when she took the test, this is what she ended up with. How could you influence her feeling about her work right now based on the feedback that you possibly could give her? Real quick discussion, self-efficacy, impacting that at a high level, creating an environment where kids continue to learn. Yeah, so I see a lot of you doing the right things, right? How many of you were analyzing the errors? How many of you took the time to analyze the errors? It's really simple. You see the errors so clearly. The joy I'm seeing in our change of our view of assessment is we're not looking at it to get a score. We're using assessment as an instructional tool to inform us and inform students also, but inform us of where are the errors and how can I intervene for that error. And that will shorten the process and close the gap, and Charlie will be able to see herself as I can do this because of how you intervened for her, because you were analyzing the error. What's the error?
Missed the pattern.
She was going with a pattern of OA, and she didn't hit, she forgot that there's this thing called an L, and so she went with cold as OA, and you could just take that through verbal feedback and work with her on that. You wouldn't have to have a mark on this paper. You wouldn't have to have a -5, a +5, a red mark. You know what the error is, because that's what you look for when you're looking at how kids did or performed on an assessment. That tool that you designed with thoughtfulness in mind about how do we know if they've learned it? Whether that's a spelling test, a math test, a science test, whatever you teach test, right? Once you design that, the concept of self-efficacy in a learning-centered classroom is where are the common errors, not what's the score, where are the errors that a student might make and how can I help them with those errors? Charlie could, if you did this right, she would not view herself as a -5 with red marks all over her paper. She could view herself as, I can do this. And all it would really require is you to notice any other kids that might have the same issue and work with them in a small group. Or if not, work with her. The basis of this finally boils down to teachers sitting next to kids and helping them with the errors that they are making, because you see learning as part of that journey, and errors are part of that journey also. Whenever it's moved, if you can move away from an assessment is only to get a score, to measure how kids get it, and not using it as a tool to analyze for the errors, then we got to make that shift for the sake of kids, for the sake of Charlie. In everything we do, everything we do is a learning experience when you think about it, right? This, kindergarten teachers, you know what that is, right? That's a workbook page. All of us know what that is. That's a workbook page. Not bad. There's nothing wrong with having kids practice a concept. There's nothing wrong with that. Remember, most of our events in our classrooms are formative events. Practices to the concept, because effort and preparation is what leads to success. So we provide the effort and preparation for that success in numerous formative events that happen throughout a unit of instruction. That's kind of our flow, isn't it? Our flow is to provide great first instruction and then processing and practice tools for kids to kind of develop and deepen the understanding. That's what we do really, really well. And then we do that assessment thing. This is a workbook page. The teacher taught the number 9. And we've got some issues here. What are the issues here?
I would love for her to communicate to me what her drawing's all about.
Yes. Oh, thank you. You just want to know what that's going. Tell me about this. Tell me about your flowers.
I see 9.
You do see 9. Okay. That's interesting. How many of you see 9 in there? Really? Do you? What do you see 9 at? Where do you see the 9 in this? Oh, you're counting the petals. Okay, I got to admit, I did too. Now, as I count them, I go, no. One of them has 8, one of them has 9, one of them has 10. Ah.
But the 9, she's placing it.
Oh, 8, 9, 10. Whoa. Okay, that's for stretching. Okay. One teacher actually said she has 9. Look, she has it deeply. She has 3 flowers. Each flower has 3 parts: leaves, stems, flowering buds. 3 times 3 is 9. She should be in the advanced math class. No, that's not it either. That's really not it. Why? Right? But if you really look at this, you know why. But you got to know. See, we got to move away of making assumptions about why kids didn't do so well on something, and investigate where the error was. Look, she doesn't know tally marks. Okay, she doesn't know tally marks. She's in kindergarten when she took. It's the first. You teach your raise your hand if you have a kid that's a child that's a kindergarten age kid. Have you taught them tally marks already?
Not yet.
No, of course not. You better in this class, because if you were in this school, you'd get counted down for not knowing tally marks. Don't talk on parents. Yeah, and let me be really clear with everybody. Drawing them does not teach a child tally marks. Creating the correct answer does not teach a child, just drawing the correct answer does not teach a child what tally marks are all about. That's still a picture for her. You've got to sit down with all the kids that don't know tally marks and help, if you think that was important, that you want them to know, that it might be a tool for counting and ordering things, and teach them what that's all about. But don't just draw a picture of it and think you've intervened. This is what we mean by intervention at every level. And this is simply because we ran out of time. She just ran out of time. Don't make the mistake of thinking that kids don't complete their work because they're lazy or they're too slow or they don't understand the concept. She ran out of time because they had to go to the next learning activity. If you know Charlie's a pleaser. How many of you have a child that's a pleaser? How many of you have a child that's not a pleaser? Yeah, that happens too, right? There's 9 different personality types. Charlie is a pleaser. You really matter to her. She's trying to please you all the time. So she will be your darling child. She will be the kid that you want to sit next to the kids who are troublemakers because she is so sweet and a friend to everybody. But man, how you see her really matters to her. Really matters to her. So she thought you would like flowers instead of sticks. It takes a long time to draw flowers, 9 of them. Particularly when you spend so much time drawing a rainbow 9. Right? That takes a long time. She just hasn't managed her time yet. So I hate that because in a way, I like it that she thinks math is colorful. I guess she could have had a blue 9 or a red 9, but she said, you would like a rainbow 9. Yeah? Let's understand our kids, teach vicariously through the eyes of students, understand where their errors are, help them with their errors, and not just get scores going on in our grade books. Or feedback to kids is just about a score because of this self-efficacy factor. Charlie will view herself in this feedback. You got to really be focused on that. So in this classroom, right, is that a formative event or a summative event? What do you think? The way the teacher graded it, is it formative? The way the teacher interacted with it, is it a formative event or a summative event? It's designed to be a formative event. What does the indicator up here show you? Summative. So when we think about our journey of this Dr. Hattie, back to Dr. John Hattie. He put self-efficacy as number 11. Now, if I wish it had been number 10, that'd been a cool list. Number 10 on the list is, and number 11 on the list is self-efficacy. A 0.92 effect size. If 0.4 is normal growth, 0.92 would double the speed of learning. This is his list. I talked about those two earlier. Hey, I want to show you something though. See this self-reported grades? 1.33. In Marzano's study, he said you should have kids track and study their progress. So self-reporting where they are in their learning would be a critical step in the process, right? Makes sense. You're gonna see how it connects to self-efficacy. So this one has a direct impact on student self-efficacy, having kids self-report where they are in their learning. Compare their results to the standards and learning targets, and where are you in hitting those targets? Here's where you are, here's where you need to be, what do you need to do to close the gap, how can I help? Helping kids design and execute plans of action to manage prospective situations requires that they do some self-reporting, cognitive task analysis, self-efficacy. The actions that are necessary to manage prospective situations. So if you think of that then, advantages of self-efficacy. When high levels of self-efficacy, they enhance one's accomplishments and feelings of personal well-being. They help you remain calm. They increase your willingness to experiment with new ideas, and they encourage you to set higher expectations. This is a go-to win for all of us in our classrooms. How do we manage it then, right? Well, when you're answering question 3, you're managing a lot of that in question 3. Question 3, answering the third critical question theme, how will we respond when students don't learn? That is not just what we do as a team. The first level of intervention is your classroom. Then we work together with our colleagues to understand processes and implement processes and go watch a process where you're having kids experience a positive even though they may have had a negative result, or how you take a positive and make it about the learning targets, not comparing yourself to other kids. And how do you help them develop the right kind of feeling in that learning? I saw a student get a test paper back last week down in Arkansas, and I said, how'd you do? He said, terrible. Terrible. Because he got like a 65. They're on percents down there. You got a 65%. I said, that's not terrible. It's failing. I said, well, let's take a look at what you got right here. Because you have a lot of stuff in here that you got right. You didn't fail. Your score is a 65, but you didn't fail. You didn't do terrible on this. There's some areas you need to learn and work about and work on. But let's take a look at all these, see the strengths that you have. Now identify the areas you need to work on, right? See it all the time in classrooms that orchestrate for that. I saw a Wisconsin teacher, she does multiplication fact, fluency things with kids. And kids have to identify in their process that she guides them through. They don't just see their score, they think about, well, which ones do I need to work on now? They actually list those out, and they know that those are their learning targets for the next time before they take the test again. Because she just decided to organize and say, this is not just about your score on a timed math facts test. This is about identifying which ones do you know, which ones don't you know, your strengths and your areas of weakness, and then think about what we need to do, what strategies we need to employ to address those areas of weakness. If we do that with students, if you take that level of work to assessment, I think then we really understand that it's going to ensure extra time and support in that way, prompt intervention, timely and directed, and I think it should be somewhat systematic. I'm never going to say everybody has to do the highlighting thing. I am going to say everybody's going to have to do something to interact with kids to help to analyze where their errors are and then intervene for where their errors are in the classroom. So some of the strategies we've seen, right, because this is a fixed mindset kid. Boy, I hope you haven't found any of those so far this year. You've been at it for 3 weeks. Hopefully you don't have any fixed mindset kids right now. Every now and then you end up with some who came into your classrooms already thinking they can't do this, right? If you have a fixed mindset kid, there's pessimism, sense of utility, self-criticism, denial, cover-up, like those kids high-fiving each other, that kind of thing. Growth mindset kids have confidence, self-efficacy, and growth mindset connected. right? They're connected. They have confidence, optimism, strong desire to succeed, right? So in our theories of self-reporting, let's just think about this. When, I don't know what your process is. Do you guys give, do you give progress reports? How often? Three, you're on the trimester. So during that so that's like a great reporting card every trimester. When do you give the progress reports? When do you have kids calculate their grades? How often do you have them do that? Every 4.5 weeks of your class? How about everybody else? Everybody does this kind of standard? So you have them calculate their grades and then see what their strengths are and what they need to work on. I'm just thinking. If we have self-reporting grades as the third highest thing we should be doing, then shouldn't we, I'm just asking, shouldn't we have kids self-report where they are in their learning, and how often should we do that? What is the process that we go through, that we take kids through, that we can guarantee that no matter which teacher they have, they're going to do this at the 4.5 week mark? I don't know what it is, but I want us to just stop and think about it, because sometimes we think we're doing progress reports, and we're actually, when we send them, do you send them home by paper or by electronic? Electronic? Okay, so that's even more interesting, right? Because used to, we send them home by paper and kids would leave them on the floor, right? Now we send them home electronically, and what's our big hope? What's your big hope that will happen? Go ahead and say, what's your big hope of what will happen with that electronic progress report? The parents actually look at it, and a lot of yours do. Right? Don't you think a lot of yours do? Okay, but then what are you hoping?
They have a conversation with
That they have a conversation with their child, and they have the right conversation with their child. And here's the problem, we don't know that. We have really good parents out there who do not know how to conference with their child. We're the experts in this. Parents are not. Anybody here ever run a student-led conference session in your classroom? Isn't that interesting how if you don't front load that, parents have no idea how to help their child process their data or think about what. We have to help them a lot with parent-led, student-led conferences, right? Is that an amen?
Amen.
You have to front load that thing like crazy with the student and with the parent of how to interact with the information that they're going to look at in a student-led conference. They just don't know. So what do you think could happen possibly at home with an electronic progress report? They could totally miss the boat. If we're wanting kids in our theories of goal settings, if we're wanting kids to process data, to take ownership of the data, and we want to do it like as simple as progress reports or report cards, what might you think would be in place by your team? What would your team create? What products, I hate to use that term, but really what tool would your team create to have kids track and study their progress, to do student self-reporting? Even on something that's common among all of us, at the same time, every 4.5 weeks and every trimester, that we have kids process their grades. Huddle up as a team, huddle up as a team. Because this is definitely team-driven. It's specific by team. It's not by school. There's no form, guys, there's no form that you create for the whole school. Right? Amen? It's specific by content and grade level. What would you expect to be on that form to have kids process where they are and self-report where they are in the learning? Your turn to have this conversation. What might that look like? Yeah, so student self-reporting, right? You can do it as your conclusion of a lesson. You can do it. It can be predictable. You guys are model PLC school, right? Right. So you have the opportunity. I hope you'll do this. I would love to see an Iowa school, and this could be it, right? Win the DeFore Award. That'd be really cool. It's DeFore Award. It's in honor of Rick DeFore. So this is we put it together. You have to be on the side as a model PLC school. We tried. Oh, you did? Okay. If you receive it, it's $25,000, no strings attached. Beautiful little tribute to Rick DeFore kind of trophy. But our idea is that Fern Creek High School is the last high school to receive. They're in Louisville, Kentucky, and they have a really challenging demographic student body. They're on a trimester also, but every 6 weeks, kids calculate their grades. Each team has developed their own calculation process, and they reflect on what's working and isn't working in their theories and processes of learning. They set new goals, right? They set new goals for the next grading period, and they identify action steps, because a goal is pretty much useless without action steps. So that has to be part of your format. What actions will you take, right? So they have kids identify actions, and then they ask, how can I be helpful for you to accomplish your goals, right? So it's a pretty cool put ownership on kids idea. While you're doing that, you're helping them get it, self-efficacy, your belief in your capability to organize and execute a plan of action to manage a prospective situation. It's just the teachers are organizing for that. They're teaching kids how to do it through this goal-setting strategy. What are your strengths? What areas do you need to improve on? What's working? What isn't working? What are your goals? What action steps do you need to take in the process? Now, I know a lot of you don't have access to the handout, so I have a whole page in there on theories of goal setting. Just kind of encapsulating that. Here it is. The goal has to be realistic and attainable. All right? It has to be desirable and education dependent. In other words, you're not going to ask them to write in there, we'll hire a tutor to help me with geometry. Okay? It's what will we do in this building, this classroom? How can I help you with that? Okay? The goal is suggested or at least embraced by the student, and then the student can see a clear path. Those are the action steps. You got to have the action steps for achieving the goal. And it has to be supported by people important to them. We're number 2 on their list of most significant and important people in their lives. Parents are number 1. Teachers and coaches are number 2. Most important people in kids' lives. So we support that. It could be tailored to recognize that kids are different and they have different goals because of where they are currently in their learning. But it always has to be eventually driven to mastery. They get you to master the concepts. You're here, here's where you need to be, what are you going to have to do, what actions do we, and then you're going to have to check in with kids on those action steps. It's not just writing the action steps, it's checking in with them. And everybody, you don't have to check in with every kid. But if you have any kids that are struggling, you definitely want to check in with them more frequently than others. That action step is the touch point, all right, the milestone, the post marker, right, the signpost marker along a journey. You say, how's that working for you? Anybody here have a goal, right, a personal goal that you're trying to accomplish right now? Anybody? Yeah, I have one right now too. This road life is killing me because of bad eating habits. So I put a goal out there to eat better. Mainly, I just want to lose weight, right? The action steps require me to exercise, on a regular basis and watch what I eat. And every night I review those action steps. And sometimes I feel really good about the goal that I'm accomplishing, and sometimes I got to get back on that action step. It's the action step that helps drive that work. But if you can't get personal feedback, you got somebody else to help you with that feedback. Okay. Self-efficacy requires goal setting, student self-reporting. It's part of the assessment process. The assessment process that we look at, I think you know this, but just kind of, we're working really hard. How many of you are writing common assessments? Are those hard to write? Sometimes they're really hard to write and to write them well. So assessment requires good assessment architecture And it requires that, oh, sorry, press the wrong button. It also requires that we understand what the purpose is of the assessment and then understand how to communicate the results to one another, okay? Then it provides us instructional agility. As we interpret the results, we find out what are the common errors and what we need to do differently. All right, that's just normal part of the process of being a collaborative team in a PLC. But the final part is this part right here, student investment. Student investment in the assessment process is one of your go-tos for self-efficacy. But here it is. It means you have to help students accurately interpret their results. And you have to help them understand that assessment, in your view, is not for a score. In your view, it's to help validate your theories of learning and actually what you're able to accomplish and the level of mastery to the learning goals that you established in the first place. So if we take that and we say, well, if we combine all those together, then that should provide hope, efficacy, and achievement. Our folks at Solution Tree, who are the gurus of assessment, I do some of the work with them, but the gurus of it, that's what you get when you organize those three circles. You get hope for teachers, efficacy for teachers, achievement levels are increased because of what teachers do, but you also get the same thing for kids. Orchestrating that, an impact will have a tremendous impact. Orchestrating the student investment. If you look at learning-centered classroom, student-centered classroom, who doesn't want their kids to be, if we ever say, how do you want your kids to approach learning? You say, I want them to be motivated, I want them to be engaged. Look at the final column on what Dr. Bob Marzano. How many of you heard of Dr. Bob Marzano? Yeah, Marzano, wow, what a guy, huh? Former science teacher, high school science teacher, got it working on his doctorate, loved the research side and the data stuff, so he started working and created that whole Marzano Research Lab, where they don't do any research. They just study the research. They're like, he does like Hattie does, except for he's been doing it longer. They do a meta-analysis of all the research that's been done on a topic, and they come up with the most promising practices based on what we're finding works, in what teachers are finding and researchers are finding work in the classroom. So meta-analysis is their approach also. Effect size is their approach as well. 4 areas that we're really got to be paying attention to. If you want a highly engaged, student-centered, motivated classroom, the first thing you have to do is organize, well, you have to pay attention to all these. You got to ask yourself, are kids emotionally connected here in this classroom? I mean, right? Emotions, kids have to be emotionally connected. Here's what they found great teachers do. Just take a look at the first column, right? What I find is that we're really good at that. Do you think so? I mean, if I were to ask you, what have you found to motivate kids? A lot of the things you have on your list are in column number 1. Just think about it, right? You don't have to teach for very long before you develop some theories about motivation and engagement. Most of us know that these are critical to having kids have an emotional connection. We work really hard. How many of you work really hard on building positive teacher-student relationships? Yeah, it's like our go-to. What is that? What's the quote? We always say, somebody's always saying it. What's the quote about they don't care what you know until they know that you care. Yeah, we live that thing, right? Use humor, demonstrate intensity, enthusiasm, incorporate physical movement, and use effective pacing. Right? Number 2, interest. A lot of us put those things on our list too. How many of you do games in your classroom? Games, formats in your classroom, kind of like $25,000 pyramid was a game. Yeah, you should use games to engage kids in the learning process. You also use your hooks, and sometimes your hook is present unusual information, initiate friendly controversy, and then the other thing you do, we work really hard at, is how do I get more kids to respond to a question that I ask in class? Do that real quick. Just turn to your neighbor and tell your favorite strategy that you use to get. Remember, it used to be who raises their hand one person got called on, right? What's your favorite strategy for making sure that all the kids are having to respond to a question you ask in class? Ready to go. Okay, yeah, so I saw one teacher use the popsicle stick thing, so kids always had to stay engaged. And then she would, after she did it though, she had a can, and she'd put the popsicle stick in, and she'd ask the question. And I go, you need to put that. So she had 2 cans. No, you need to put that popsicle stick right back in that other can, right? So that kid says, oh, she may call on me again. I've also seen the use of whiteboards. How many of you use the whiteboards where all the kids have to respond? And you just go, yeah, okay, I'm gonna have to reteach this, right? That kind of thing, yeah. How many of you use the QR readers? Anybody using QR readers? Isn't that's kind of cool, right? Just pass your phone and then hold up the QR code, you can tell, so they're all having to respond. If you don't use that technology, you can just use antiquated technology like tents at the desk, A, B, C, D, and you ask a question and you ask them to show what they think is answer A, B, C, or D. How many of you use that one? Okay. In your handouts, there are like 3 pages of those examples if you want some more of those, okay? Because there's all kinds of different ways of increasing response rates among kids. How many of you did something at the beginning of the school year? Elementary people, you're doing data binders, right? A lot of you, is everybody doing data binders here? How many of you did an all about me sheet or something with your kids at the beginning of the school year? Now, high school, middle school, how many of you did something like that? Yay. Yeah, and it's not all about me, it's interest surveys and ambition surveys, right, that you can get from something, okay? So that's how you drive the importance and then apply the knowledge. That last column though, yeah, I put that in there, you see where he says it? That the belief in one's ability to perform a task. Now that's a little different, but it's similar to what Hattie said. He says, remember, I think Hattie's right because he studied it longer than Marzano. It's your belief in your capability to organize and execute a plan of action to manage a prospective situation. Okay? Here's what you have to do. You have to have students track and study their progress. You have to use effective verbal feedback. You have to provide examples of self-efficacy. So the one that people struggle the most with is the study part of when you're having kids track their progress. It's the study, having kids study what that means and what's working and isn't working. That's the pathway to the self-efficacy that you have to begin to expand on and explore with kids. Marzano gave us 5 different strategies for managing that as well. All right, so we're going to experience that. Really, stand up real quickly, if you would, please. And let's come to the aisles, if you would. And as you come to the aisles, let's have two even numbered rows. That aisle and this aisle. 2 even numbered rows where you're facing someone right across from you. All right. There's a good chance to take it off. Keep the blood flowing again. All right. Get yourself a room. Yeah.
Sorry, I don't mean to step on you.
You guys can slide on down a little bit more. You get a little more room there. A little more room at the top.
I'm gonna be sore after sitting.
Oh, I know. That was cool.
Okay.
Can I move it? Oh, sorry. Don't hit it.
Let's go across that. You guys okay up there? All right, so very first thing, make sure you're across with someone. All right? It's not going to be group huddle talks. You're going to have a conversation with one other person. You're going to share your effort with them. That's what this strategy is called, sharing our effort. The challenge, honestly, is not to listen in to all the other people, but to really just have your conversation with the person across from you. All right? So, we call it the AD line. You're going to do several different things in this process. We're going to take each question one by one. You're first of all going to self-rate how you think you do. You're going to self-report. All right? Self-report. Are you a 5, 4, 3, 2, or 1? All right? And don't worry about where you are right now because we have all kinds of tools to help us in this journey, all right? So you're going to self-rate where you think you are in the learning of the process of having kids track and study the progress. Then you're going to report out some of the strategies you use, okay? So first of all, where are you in I help students set personal academic goals and track their progress over time? Just for self-report, where you think you are with that? I help students set personal academic goals and track their progress over time.
Goals, but I mean,
Wait, we can't talk to you.
All right, so here we go.
we're supposed to say
So you might know, if you reported a 4, you're probably underreporting, you're probably really a 5, okay? If you're a 3, that means you're on the journey, you just need to tweak it a little bit. If you're a 2 or a 1, you need to listen to somebody who is a 3, 4, or 5, all right? Or at least share your part. Now look, if you're both here, or here, or here, what I want you to do is share your thinking. If we know that self-efficacy has such a high impact on student learning, and if we know the power of that in regard to self-reporting and cognitive task analysis, because when they're self-reporting, they'll be doing the cognitive task analysis to identify what their strengths are, where their errors are, what they need to improve in. And cognitive task analysis was number 5 on the list. Number 5. So number 3 was self-reporting. Number 5 was cognitive task analysis, and number 11 was self-efficacy. So you're going to explain what your thinking is, where you're going to go with this, all right? The so what part. All right, so again, just the first one. Where are you? Show your neighbor again where you are. Be honest. Now share what you're thinking you need to do or what your successful processes are. Ready? Go. Just for the first one. Just for the first one.
I feel like sometimes they set goals and maybe track it just by saying what they think they've learned so far, but not track it like day to day.
I know how to do it.
It's a lot to think about.
It didn't look like what it would for like, you know, I had before. Yeah. They were they got correct. They got that shape. So
Like trajectory or grades or anything, or their progress.
right. No, like just different years outside of
Right.
It's so big that we don't even And that's my thing, is I think I've had to figure it out, but nobody else like followed me. So it's like,
I know last year we talked about like more like standards-based grading compared to traditional grading, and so I feel like if I switched to standards-based grading, that would help the kids be able to set goals and track their progress a little better. But it's like I'm just trying to figure out my standards and my curriculum right now. I don't have time to think about changing my grading too.
So you bring us back together, we'll go to the next kid, right? Next kid. Again, self-report, and then I want you to do another thing on this, okay? Because it goes like this. I have students examine and reflect on their effort and preparation for assignments and assessments. And it has to go beyond asking them, did you even bother to study? Okay, you gotta go deeper. Because you gotta have them connect to their personal theories about learning. What works for you? How do you learn best? Well, what I want you to do is, first of all, self-report with how you do that with kids, and then I want you to share with your partner your personal theory for learning. In other words, when you were having to prepare for an assessment, what was your go-to strategy? What tools did you use? What process did you use? Also think about the environment that you liked to study and learn in. Okay? That's what I want you to do with you. See if they have the same one or if they used a different process than you. Okay? Ready? Self-report on doing this with students, and then share your own process and theories for study.
Oh, okay. But how do we I'm like 2 on this. Like right now, my 8th graders are doing a unit on waves, and so we have what we call a learning log. They write the objective, and then at the end of the class period or end of a lesson, which might take a couple days, they're supposed to write what they learned and what questions they might still have. But like I don't know that I make them think about what things do you need to do to prepare for an assignment or assessment. And then like my personal theories about learning, like I know when I studied I needed it to be quiet, or talk things over with a group of people. I couldn't have a lot of background noise where I feel like kids today, they have music going or, whatever. So I think sometimes the kids forget that they need to be mindful of everybody's learning strategies. So.
Reading is my favorite.
Yeah.
So I think when I was younger, my study habits was just because I was
Right. It's weird to think about the kids like, what is your goal for an assessment and how are you going to get there? Because we don't usually talk about it that way.
I feel like I also became a better learner when I got
Okay,
into
so
college.
let's invite you back. It's kind of explore. Make sure you can see the entire room for this next activity. We're just going to explore some of these different theories because that's where we get bogged down in the process. I see a lot of people creating nice forms, and they're great, but if you don't use them for the components of having kids track and study their progress, to self-report, to do a cognitive task analysis, then we're just missing part of the boat here, right? And then a very important part, this is the self-efficacy part. So let's see how we all do this. How many of you, let's just start with the learning environment. How many of you think kids should have a quiet place to study? That's our go-to. That's our go-to. How many of you like studying with background noise? Raise your hand high. What we know is that some kids actually would probably do better with headphones on and background noise. And some kids have no business with those headphones on. Okay? Trust me, you're not going to convince them of that until they look at their results. And you ask them about that from their results. If our go-to is to always just go to our go-to, then sometimes we'll forget about the other ones. How many of you like the state of the environment? How many of you like brightly lit rooms when you're studying and preparing? A brightly lit room? How many of you prefer just a more dimly lit room, like just lighting up? I was in a fourth grade teaching classroom down in Texas. I had never seen so many different learning environments in one room in my entire life. Now she had places that were dimly lit, she had places that were brightly lit, she had bounce ball things, where the kids needed to move, and she had tables down all the way down to the floor where kids could just sit and stretch out on the floor to study and learn, right? And then she had the traditional setting as well. I mean, she had really created this opportunity of different learning environments because we know, well, how many of you, one of our go-tos is to ask kids if they have a place to study and if it's quiet. How many of you have different places that you study in? How many of you study at a desk? When you're preparing for an assessment, you've got your stuff laid out at a table, a desk, or something like that. How many of you don't do that? How many of you study on the sofa? And you lay stuff out on the sofa, coffee table? Yeah. How many of you study in bed? It's just a theory of comfort, right? It's just different ways of studying. How many of you, let's go on to this. How many of you take notes as a way of capturing information in preparation for assignments and assessments? You took notes. Yeah. How many of you didn't take notes? How many of you Good. What strategy did you use? Just read. How many of you have that gift of being able to read something and it just sticks? Yeah, there's some people that works. The problem I have with note taking is we teach one way of taking notes to kids. Right? And what we find is you all use, how many of you actually take notes the way your teachers taught you to take notes? Only a handful of us do. Now, my teachers taught note taking is that formal Roman numeral 1, letter A, 1, 2, 3, like good grief. That didn't work for me at all. So I began to try different note-taking strategies. How many of you, so my strategy was I tried the highlighting technique. Anybody else? There you go. I highlighted everything. How'd you know? My entire book would be like lime green. and I just started to slow down my process of reading the material, right? So my next step was to take notes by writing in the margins of my book. How many of you let you know taking strategy, right, in the margin of the book? And if you didn't use the book, I took notes on notebook papers, right? And how many of you, I didn't do the bullet, how many of you take bullets when you take, you used to do bullet points? Yeah, I wrote narratives. How many of you took narratives when you took your notes? Yeah. How many of you take notes, if you're given handouts, how many of you take notes right on the handouts? And then how many of you, when you're given handouts, take notes on a separate thing like your computer or a notebook pad? Just different ways. How many of you take notes like that? Yeah. Yeah.
That's all colors.
It's all colors. And that is, honestly, I did this session on student self-efficacy and student data notebooks. That's the entire 90-minute session on one page. She's captured it all. There are different ways of note-taking, right? How many of you have kids, though, that don't take notes? Well, are you telling them they need to? They might need to if they struggle, but you need to have them consume their data to that strategy. I have seen some interesting study skills classes, and we teach them, they'll spend a whole semester to study, or quarter to study skills class, and then there's no transference of the study skills strategy. They won't do that until they process their own information. And then think about what would work, and we begin to offer them some different ideas of how to plan and execute and organize that plan of action to manage a perceived situation. What are the action steps that you might try? That's the study part of it. How many of you have kids who don't take notes in your classroom? How many of you have kids who don't bring paper and pencil to the class? Not very many, but a few. What's their theory of learning? Tell your neighbor real quick. A kid who doesn't bring their paper and pencil to class, what is their theory of learning?
They don't need to write it down. You're okay with that? No.
There are always those questions, and there's one that's like so smart that like they don't have
I feel like going to middle school, I give them less choice than they would at high school.
but like, and
All
so,
right, so yeah, share out. Who wants to share out? Now, some of them get irresponsible, but some of them have a real theory. What's their theory? Share it out. What's a kid's theory that doesn't bring paper and pencil to class?
I'll remember it.
I'll remember it. I can just remember things. Right? And trust me, I have lots of validation to that. I can remember a movie, the lines of the movie, the plots of the movie. I remember steps of the game, right? I don't have to write everything down. How many of you like studying with other people? In preparation for assignments and assessments, you like to get with other people and study? Raise your hand. It depends on some people like this. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Depends on the group. Some of us go, no, I would always prefer to study by myself. Raise your hand if you're a study by myself person. Yeah, just think about that and how we structure classrooms and what we do with kids. How we organize that and demonstrate to kids that sometimes it works to study in a group, sometimes it's better to study on your own, right? Some of you might be like me. When I finally learned this, when I had to prepare for an assessment that was a high-stakes assessment, like to pass that class or something, I would get in a room, lock the door so I wouldn't be disturbed. I had that thing called squirrel like crazy. You know that thing called squirrel? Squirrel. Yeah, let's do that instead of this, right? So I have to lock the door. I pace the room. I do not sit down. The pacing, I find out later, stimulates blood flow and oxygen to the brain. And then I teach the walls. Yeah, I use my notes. They're scripted notes. I figured the teacher's going to test us on what he talked about, what she talked about. So I teach the walls using my notes. And my rule, when I know I'm ready, is when I can teach the wall 3 times without using my notes. Then I'm prepared. And I usually work for me. We find different theories, and our caution is that when you have kids track and study, that's key, study, is that you don't go to your default, that you explore the other ways too. Like I had a math teacher who said, whenever I struggled, I just did more math problems. I would just keep doing math problems until I felt confident. That's not a bad theory. That's a great theory. Doing more, practicing more, being more confident in it, that's not a bad theory, right? Amen. It's not the only theory, because that won't work for every kid. Some kids will need a different approach, a unique strategy, another way, besides doing more problems. The next two, let's take these next two, baby. Well, let's take the next one. Give me where's your thumb on this? I avoid verbal feedback that could create a fixed mindset. Show your neighbor your thumb. I avoid verbal feedback that could create a fixed mindset.
I feel like
When I give feedback, I try to give it in a way to question them if it's not quite right, but otherwise encourage them.
I will talk about someone's work and I actually try to.
I feel like sometimes there's kids that are still gonna take it personally.
I'm talking about maybe my class.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking too. When I feel like it's a teacher talking about sarcasm.
Right,
I don't know
right.
I just wanted to give you direction on what to talk about, so started talking about. So I'm kind of curious, what did you guys talk about just now? I avoid, most of us, really all of us should be here. Because none of us should be going, well, I'm kind of good at that, and kind of not good at that. All of us should be really great at the verbal feedback, right, that avoids fixed mindsets. What were you talking about? The kind of,
I think it's like ingrained in you. Like you don't mean to. After the fact, you're like, oh my gosh, I just set them up for fixed mindset.
yeah, like give me this example. Anybody got an example of a fixed mindset feedback? Okay, give us one for yourself.
Well, I mean, I tend to get in the fixed mindset of like, sorry guys, I'm not good at math. And like, even though I don't teach math, I feel like I should say that in front of them because I want them to have a growth mindset.
Yeah, that could be, that's a good example, right? All right, give it, anybody else? I mean, the thing to do is explore, raise awareness. Actually, one of the things I love about Dr. DeFore was he did say, you gotta make that which is unconscious conscious. Our discussion, our dialogue, being on the same page, our collaborative work actually leads us all to be more conscious, right? So what I want you to do is I want you to share some examples of feedback that can create fixed mindsets.
Even compliments, like saying, you're so smart.
That's a definitely one. Yeah, Carol Wexler. Her study of that was crazy, wasn't it? Did you guys see her study on that? Where she put kids into two groups? Yeah. You talked about that, where she gave them that challenging task, and one group gave the kids feedback on, you're so great, you're so smart, you're brilliant, you're a genius. And the other group gave kids feedback about, wow, I could tell you just were kept at it, and I could almost see the wheels turning. I loved how you took that and broke that apart and solved a problem. And when they gave the kids the next challenging card, the kids who got the feedback about so smart, brilliant, bright, attempt, they didn't want to risk you not seeing them that way, so they wouldn't take on more challenging tasks. The other kids thought, yeah, you see me as problem solver, right? An explorer, which is pretty cool, right? So, real quick, give us some examples with your colleague of feedback that you use to promote a growth mindset. What are some of the examples that you use? Which, by the way, some of those could be, I use stories and quotes, okay? So what are some examples you use to help kids develop a growth mindset? Ready? Go. Could be a story, could be a
I like
quote.
how you tried,
Like, because when I looked
when
through
they're doing something, you know, like at a certain thing, you kept with it.
I was kind of like, I love the way that you were highlighting those things with the stuff, like, some would go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, some would all the time.
I was like, about that person, like, what they're doing, their actions.
I was going to I love the way that so many stuff, I love the way that when things like that, such as right, this is the right way to do it.
Right.
And I think that's
Right, oh, that's right, yeah. I should do more of those music. Those are good, and I love those. I forgot they existed. I never did those in college.
Probably not.
Right.
I can mentally remind you when you're on a platform. Yeah.
I'm like, it's your last year.
Right.
She's all nervous. It's just me and Mason. Like, it'll be fine. I'm like, he's really not gonna ask you all of those questions in the hour examination. I'm like, you'll never get through. And I'm like, she said something about Sky, because Sky Betts didn't get confirmed last year as an 8th grader. I think partly because she missed a lot. And I think you just but I don't even know if she's gonna come and finish this year or not. I don't know. They weren't at the meeting, so.
Okay, Okay, so,
Being successful because he is very smart.
yeah, it's true.
I can think about right now.
So I'm gonna take you back to, how important this verbal feedback is. Remember Albert Bandura, social learning theorist, Medal of Honor winner, Presidential Medal of Honor winner for his role in education. The guy that really helped us understand self-efficacy and the power of self-efficacy, how we define it. He said verbal persuasion is one of the keys for self-efficacy. Marzano captured it once again. Verbal feedback is one of the most important keys. So verbal feedback, I always find this, I'm trying to save teachers time anymore. So stop writing on all their pages. Find time to have verbal conversations. Why is verbal feedback so much more powerful? More personal. Connects to that, actually that chart, doesn't it? Helps build positive interpersonal relationships. Right? Why else is it more personal? Why else? Yeah, you actually know if they get it. You write on the paper, but you don't know if they read it. You don't know if they read it, if it helped, if they understood and where they're going, or if it was an accurate interpretation of what you were wanting them to move forward. That's critical. You have better success with accurate interpretation of their data, helping kids accurately interpret that data through verbal feedback than with written feedback. People misinterpret written feedback all the time. How many of you ever got a text message and you go, I don't know, are they mad at me? Why is it all in caps? Are they going to be a happy thing, right? Who knows, right? Yeah. Why else? Any other reason for verbal feedback being more powerful? Yes.
It's like confusions, like the 3 flowers that I ran out of time.
Yeah, it helps clear up confusion for you, right? As well as the student. Why else is verbal feedback more powerful? It's specific. Very specific. Why else? There's the, I was hoping I'd get that. Timing. So much faster. It is just so much faster to do verbal feedback than to write out all their papers and spend time doing that. And one more back here.
Gives your student a voice.
Yes, which is part of that positive interpersonal relationship you're building with kids, and the applying of the knowledge that you're building with kids, and actually connecting it to the goals that you have with kids. Just have so much more powerful than all that written feedback that we're staying up to. How many of you stayed up till midnight sometimes already this year, writing on these papers, grading papers, looking at verbal feedback? Got to think of from that. And this last one, I just think, where are the coaches in the room? Coaches, you use this all the time. I haven't found a coach yet who doesn't have a bunch of quotes ready to go with kids. Right? Who knows Shock is Smart? Coaches do. Anybody else know Shock is Smart? Yeah. Shock Hook Horns now. You know where he was before that? VCU. What's the story? VCU, the reason he got hired by Texas is because he took the VCU Rams from the team that had to play into the March Madness, right? to the Final Four. He's known, they made a big story about all the quotes he has. 110 pages of quotes. He uses them to motivate, inspire, engage, challenge. I mean, let's face it, there's a reason that Barnes & Noble has bookshelves with quote books on them. I have yet found a principal, check me out, who doesn't have a quote book in their office. Right? And how many of you have quote books? How many of you have a quote that you live by? Yeah. Shock is Smart. My favorite story is when they asked him, so what do you think about the report that gives your VCU Rams a 0.99% chance of winning the national tournament? What do you think about that? He says, oh my gosh, that just reminds me of my favorite movie quote. My favorite movie quote of all time is from the movie Dumb and Dumber. So you're saying we got a chance. This is part of it, because this is about tracking and studying, and also using the strategies for self-efficacy that Marzano identified and also be using and get to buy that. I mean, if you want to be great, you got to go, I've got to get to here, I've got to get to here. This is not a luxury. Self-efficacy is not something you do or don't do. It's, you create a classroom environment for that very purposefully, because you know the impact it has on kids and their learning for their future success. Not just the success in your classroom, the success for their future. If your kids could walk away from your school knowing how to set goals, identify action steps, overcome perceived situations because they could organize a plan of action. That would help them become life. It would help you accomplish the mission that you were after, that you signed your contract. Let's finish this up like this. Turn to your partner, all right? And yeah, just tell them your favorite quote. I mean the one you use in your classroom. Okay. What's your favorite quote? The one you use
Well, mine's in the back of my room. It says, "Shoot for the moon, even if your world right there in the stars." I always had this one, but I don't know what it's better us, never let it rest.
Like, we're playing games and then she was like,
Yeah, back to our guy. Yeah, there you go. It's a good one.
I was in my classroom.
I'm such a movie, like, stupid. I got a couple of pages and then, like,
Like I guess that I have like little.
How many of you actually have a quote? You use it? Yeah. Yeah. I was in a high school teacher's classroom in Northern California. He was an English teacher. He pulled me in there because he wanted to show me how he did this. He has all the walls have 8 by 11 sheets of quotes. Like nicely, neatly printed out, large enough for kids to know. He says, anytime this is a challenging thing that we're getting ready to do, I direct them to a quote first of all. I say, this is going to be challenging, but I know we can accomplish. Remember this. And he directs them to, he says, I want you to write about that quote, what that quote means to you, and how it might affect you in this challenging task we're about to have. So he actually uses the quotes to kind of inspire and motivate his kids. Right? Elementary people do it like crazy. I mean, elementary people, where are you again? No, you guys have quotes all the time. You have memes, you have quotes, you do all kinds of stuff like that. And it really is designed to inspire. I ran across a high school every day, or it's Urban Prep High School in Chicago. They have the Urban Prep Creed. And every day they say the Urban Prep Creed. And I mean, it is led with enthusiasm and gusto. It's not that Charlie Brown, then, you know, it is like, boom, yeah? Because the teachers demonstrate it and lead it with that kind of intensity and enthusiasm to create emotional connections they wanted, and also use it as a tool for reminding kids, we do this is who we are, right? I don't know what yours are like. We had with Campbell, we had all kinds of them, right? Like at Campbell Elementary School, we always shoot for the top, never the bottom, not the middle, right? We were the Cougars for Pete's sake. You know what you can do with a cougar? I mean, that's one of the best mascots ever. I'm saying Cyclones are good too. Cyclones are good too, but a cougar, oh my gosh, you can do cougar claws, cougar paws, you can do cougar growls with kids, yeah, all that kind of stuff. We use our mascot. You ever notice how sports teams use their mascot to motivate and inspire? Use the cyclone for motivation and inspire, right? I think your whole concept of Team Denver is pretty powerful. How many of you have that tattooed somewhere? Team Denver. Hey, thank you, partner, for sharing their journey with you about this event. Let's come on back to our seats. I got a few more minutes to wrap up. And we'll be right back. Okay, so for my last part, because I know you don't all have didn't download the handouts and don't have our tools, but in your handouts and toolboxes, this little survey is one you should take. We're not going to do it here, but I do encourage you as a team to take this survey. You're trying to become great. I mean, that's the mission. I mean, we're already really, really good. I mean, some people would say, actually, when I stopped in Waterloo, I spent the night in Waterloo, and I stayed at the Marriott. Right over there is this coffee brewing company called Sidecar Coffee. So the guy that started that used to work for Solution Tree in the PD department. So I went over to see him at his brewing shop because he spent like 6 years building this really great brand, right? It's really, really cool. And I asked Jed, we were talking about it, and I told him I was coming to work with you guys. He said, oh my gosh, that is a great district. He says, they have such a great reputation. I said, I know, I looked online, they have all these great outstanding results. He said, yeah, that's something else about that district. So y'all already have a brand name. You're just trying to keep getting grades. and greater and greater. You're the school that people ought to be knocking on your door. They ought to be knocking on your door. I mean, when people in your state or across the nation are looking for a school that does this right, they ought to be calling you because of what you promote, what you say, and what you do, right? One of the ways of becoming great is to constantly check your current reality. This survey is about assessment practices. Assessment being our most powerful tool and all the keys that are important in that assessment process. When you look at that, we just ask you to rate yourself a 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. 5 is high, 1 is low on each item on that survey. I do that because it draws awareness of areas we might want to work on and improve in our collaborative effort. There are a couple up there that, I mean, most of those up there, I find we're really great at. You guys can find even more from it. There's usually like 3 or 4 up there that when teachers self-report, and I think they're really accurate with this. On this survey, there's no risk about it, right? It's just, where are you on the journey? There are a few items on there that teachers always self-report are lower areas that need greater concentration and focus. Like, see this one? I understand and can articulate in advance of teaching the achievement targets students are to hit. That's a high. Wouldn't you guys rate that as a 5? Wouldn't you rate that as a 5? No one's starting to teach without knowing what the targets are and being able to describe those to kids. Isn't that interesting that that's part of the assessment process? The next one. My students are informed regularly about those targets in terms they can understand, we keep reading, and in part through the study of the criteria by which their work will be evaluated and samples of high quality work. That's actually one of the lower areas the teachers report. Now that might not be true here. But when you read the full text of it, most people say, yeah, I probably don't do that part, the second part of that. They know in advance of teaching, but I don't always provide the scoring criteria or the exemplars and examples of what this is supposed to look like. Usually it says, my students can describe what the targets are that they're going to hit. That is an iffy thing. A lot of us report that lower. Although we know them, it's not always engaging the kids in the process. And that's something to change in the assessment process, right? It's interesting to me that all of these things about assessment are all about getting clear targets to kids and having kids interact with that. And if we just trace all this and connect all the dots, that's going to have the product, the tool, the thing that you create in your teamwork actually could help kids with that. I mean, I'll give you some examples, okay? So, if we want students to participate, we ought to be sure about the task clarity, relevance, and potential for success. Those are critical areas to keep kids engaged and involved in a student-centered classroom. Teachers orchestrate and organize for task clarity. They orchestrate and organize for relevance of the learning, and they orchestrate and organize for students to see that you can succeed in this. Even if you struggle, we're going to get you there. What we're doing here is important. You can do this. We're not going to give up those 3 messages. Coming back to them. What we're doing here is important. You can do this. We're not going to give up on you. We say it, model it, organize for it, protect it, reward those messages all the time. So let me give you some quick examples that are my favorite ones. If you email me, I can give you a whole 70-page document that has multiple examples. But if I were looking for the work of teams who understand the big picture and the actions you should take, because that was one of the goals. Single goal of the day was understanding the big ideas of the professional learning community at work process and how they connect to our actions and our beliefs. This is answering the questions, but it's also connecting to formative assessment. This is a unit overview sheet. When you access the documents, you're going to see 4 pages, pages 17 through 20. They organize in this science team, Bill Farrer's team, to hand these sheets to kids to have them track and study their progress throughout the unit of instruction. That sheet takes that team about 45 minutes to write. They do it really well. So you can imagine, like upper level, elementary, anytime you're teaching in the flow of the unit, this process works, right? So imagine a team sitting down during their team time. They go, our next unit is ecosystems. In ecosystems, this is why we study it. We see that over the next 3 weeks, we'll be studying the ecosystems of the world and so forth, right? Sometimes they're a little longer. This one's pretty short. They said, so in the ecosystems unit, these are the things we want to accomplish. They teach in learning targets, they teach through the concept of essential questions, which is the same as learning targets, just here's the essential questions of the unit. Either one works, right? Then they do this as a team. This is their team time. So there's 3 of them. You take the first 2 essential questions, you take the next 2 essential, I'll take the final 2 essential questions. Just give ourselves 15 minutes of team time just to write up what we think that would be as an I can statement and what we think that means in explicit success criteria. This means statements. When you move the learning target to explicit success criteria, you'll have a more accurate assessment that you're going to build. Plus, you're informing kids of what the targets are and what the criterion is for hitting the targets. Take 15 minutes of drafting it out, come back together, merge your Google to a Google Doc, and then give the next 45 minutes to clean it up. And everybody leaves their ego at the door. It's a draft. We all have the same amount of time. In 15 minutes, this is the best I can do. So let's edit it. Okay, we need to improve that. We need to include that instructional language or that language. Yeah, just put it in there. I'm okay with that. I leave my ego and my status at the door. We drafted it out. By the end of that team meeting, we have the pages, the 4 pages, including the vocabulary that we want kids to know and be able to do in this unit on ecosystems. We give it to the kids as we teach and instruct. Kids are tracking their progress, their self-reporting. When we give our short cycle quiz or formative assessment that we created, they're going to record their score, see if they're accurate in their self-reporting. Here's what it looks like. That's what students are doing. Now we're engaging kids, they're seeing where they are, they're predicting where they think they are, they're comparing that to their results. Now we can take that into the study of what's working for you in your learning practices, right? And kids are able to use this tool after they've taken the dress rehearsal. I love that. I love it. They take the dress rehearsal like 2 days prior to the real test. Instead of study guide, which they gave at the beginning of the, you don't give kids study guides at the end of the unit. You give kids study guides at the beginning. And they just take their notes and practice and they're learning, demonstrate their learning throughout the unit. Then if you give a dress rehearsal instead of that study guide at the end, right? Or review pages at the end, just give them a dress rehearsal for Pete's sakes. Why create a study guide? Give them a dress rehearsal. Dress rehearsals are part of the real world. We might as well be real world with our practices in our classrooms. You don't get certified without taking dress rehearsals and practice tests, right? You don't run a product for full market, to go to market without having run practice runs and seeing if we need to make modifications or improvements or make changes in it. We do dress rehearsals in sports and in music and drama. Studying to be, you want to become a lawyer, you want to pass the bar, you're going to take practice tests. Sell insurance, you're going to take practice tests. Study to be a doctor, you're going to take practice tests. It's all part of the real world. So how about don't grade them? Right? Just let kids take their sheets, huddle up and process the information together. And let them have that exploration and problem solving to, well, here's where you are, here's where we need to be, what are we going to have to study to close the gap? What are your strengths? What are you solid on? What do you have doubts about? What did you guess on? What do you need to study more? A process of having kids track, just a tool like that. I have some others in your handouts, like that's a tool out of a middle school. They moved off the 100% scale. They thought that was not effective. They felt like it's kind of arbitrary to put arbitrary banding, like who says, some schools say a 93 is an A. Other schools say a 90 is an A. What's the difference between an 89 and a 90? Is that big of a difference that would cost a grade letter? I mean, so they got off of that and they went with explicit success criterion for each unit. And they said, you got to get to 3s. So here's what a 2 does, right? And here's what 3s do, simple concepts to more complex. They get these kids at the beginning of the unit, and kids track their progress when they do the tasks. And all they do here is they just circle or star. Some teachers give them little stars to stick on there that show that they've accomplished the task. Now they're tracking their progress, they can study what they need to work on, and they know where they are in their learning. Self-efficacy, having to organize and execute a plan of action to master these concepts. Here's one, that's just a checklist. I like checklists. You guys like checklists or rubrics better? Which do you like to create? Do you like creating rubrics? I mean, when you're doing the work of teams, you're usually creating a tool that's a scoring guide. Do you like creating rubrics or checklists? Which do you like? Both? Yeah, sometimes one's appropriate. Checklists are really concrete. That's what I like. There's no arbitrary, there's no ambiguity in a checklist. How many of you live your life by a checklist? There's no ambiguity on that checklist. These are things I need to accomplish, and you check them off and you get them done. It's a sense of accomplishment. How many of you live your life by a rubric? No. Checklist is more normal. You can do, so this is one just yes or no, not yet. Kids track their progress on that one. You have these in your hand. That is a rubric. And this is a tool that they give to kids. I love it. I've seen so many different examples in formative assessment of how we're having kids respond to a rubric. I've even seen teachers have kids develop how many of you have had kids do that, develop the rubric? Like I saw a speech teacher, she wanted kids to do a demonstration speech, and she asked them, what would be the qualities you would look for in a good demonstration speech? And they worked with a partner, and they identified kind of a rubric format for that, and then she did this, right? She showed them a really bad one and a really good one. And she says, now, is there anything else you need to include in your rubric, right, for what you would see in a good demonstration speech? Just using assessment as that instructional tool we know it should be. You also have this tool, that's the unit, that's from an elementary school. This is the unit, and they said instead of I can statements, they went with strong mathematician statements. So those, and that's just a cut and paste job right there, right? I would change the last column. I don't think you want that in a classroom that promotes high self-efficacy does not put, I cannot do this.
Yes.
You put yet, okay? Then you got this one. This is actually a really cool one out of an English class, honors English class, in Sherlock, California. And I like this one because it actually has, I'm not quite there, almost there, I got it, but they also had the kids with a time frame. I always encourage people, put some time frames into the goal setting that you have for kids. Don't just kind of leave it open-ended. The world has time frames. We need to help kids with that time frame. What do I need to accomplish within this time frame, right, is what you're after. And to meet the quality by describing what the quality is. So you have that one, you have this one, it's a science one. All right, so I've included not just math, you also have science and English, you have secondary. I mean, I even have an elementary one in there. That's an elementary one. This is from Marzano's work, the 4 scales. Kids this is the goal, I'm currently at 2-, I want to get to a 3 by November 30th, right? They're tracking their progress, they're celebrating their progress. I mean, that's a pretty cool deal. Can I ask you something? If you had a student, if this was one of the processes you were using, and you had a student accomplish that, and they gave themselves an exclamation mark, what verbal feedback would you give them? I mean, you could miss an opportunity here because we didn't really pay attention to some dates on this thing. Remember, everything we do, we're reinforcing the principles of learning, right? So how could you help a student understand where they are in their learning? And how could you help promote a healthy self-efficacy? Because look, we had multiple attempts, finally got it. How could you help them? What would you say to this student? Yeah. Thank you. Oh, yeah. Okay, so you saw the day a whole month ahead of time. Wow. See, this is what we're talking about. If you just stick with it, and don't give up, and find ways into that, you can hit this mark. And sometimes it happens sooner than you even have thought of it. We say those things already. Just do it with the visual. Do it with evidence. Have kids consume evidence within their learning, right? This one is the multiplication fact one I was talking about from the Wisconsin 4th grade teacher, right? Where she has them identify the facts they have to work on. And she does it in a 4-point scale also. And then there's that one. I just love that one. You know, I like that one. It's like, there is not a I've seen them with smiley faces, straight line mouths, and frowny mouths. Avoid that. Why don't you say, how happy are you? Where you are in your learning, let's get to the level of 3 happiness, all right? Because that shows that you mastered the concept you're after, all right? So there's a writing one in your handouts also, if you're looking for a writing example. So just, any of these things, I've seen that in high school and elementary. So the tools are in your handouts that support the concepts we've been talking about for a student-centered classroom, student self-efficacy, and that culture of high expectations that we share with kids and with each other in this amazing journey that we've been on. And so in the time that we have left, which is really about 12, 13 minutes, I just wanted to put you to a little bit of team time, okay? And in your team time, I want you to think about what you've heard here, what your colleagues have shared with you, what's an aha, also an amen. You might as well celebrate what you already are about. But the question for you is this: so what? I mean, you're already there. The evidence is really there. It's just about always getting better. One of the things I love about Stevenson High School is we talk to teachers there, even veteran teachers. The rap about veteran teachers is they're stuck in their ways. I really despise that concept, by the way, because I'm a veteran teacher. I really don't think I'm stuck in my ways. Because it's not how long you've taught, it's whether or not you have a growth mindset. So we talk to teachers there, even veteran teachers, what they'll say is, the whole idea that you can always get better, that's kind of cool. That's kind of a thing that drives you to celebrate who you are, but where you're always going, right? So in the last part of our time together, let me just give you a chance to huddle up with your teammates. What have I shared with you? What have you shared with each other that might take you to even greater levels than you currently are? Because the challenge is, so what? What, if anything, will we do differently as a result of some back porch time together? All right? Your team time, I'll bring you back right at a little before 3:30. All right? And then we'll conclude. Okay? You ready? Team time. All right? Things that resonate with you, so what? Drink, opportunities, whatever you want to do to create a plan of action.
Suck it up.
so we've hit that mark, 3:30. All right, so let me just draw our session to conclusion. And you know, it's always a good idea just to kind of reconnect. What was our goal for the day? The goal that they asked me to come in and really visit with you about, I put it down as a really simple question. How do the big ideas connect to our practices and our beliefs? Because I really hope that we never lose the concept of the big ideas in this church. The big idea is to constantly ask questions, engage in a collaborative, ongoing process of collective inquiry. What questions do we need to ask, and then how will we respond to better meet the needs of our students? And that's kind of what it boils down to, creating a collaborative culture around those best practices. I appreciate that I got to be a small part of that journey, because I know it's you all that implement those best practices every single day and create that amazing journey for your kids and for your own colleagues. I just stop every now and then. I think about districts like yours, and I think about you signing that contract. And I think, wow, that's such a commitment to a goal that a lot of folks don't think you can accomplish, and yet you are getting nearer and nearer to that every single day because of what you do. So thank you so much for letting me be just a small part of the big journey that you're on. Thank you. All right, so Brad, anything for the rest of the group? Or?
No, you guys can go.
Go off and come. It's so odd to have a